mean, utter privilege today, really, to have Dr. Clare Rowan from Warwick University come and speak to us and actually bring some of the real Augustan coins that you've been studying. They are 2,000 years old, some of these are replicas as well, so that's fantastic. Claire, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself? I mean,
so I actually come originally from Australia, and once upon a time, I won't tell you how many years ago, yeah, I was also studying kind of classical civilization at A-level. In Australia, they don't teach you coins at A-level or anything like that, and I only discovered coins really, in the 5th year of my university degree, so yeah, it's far too late really. So I'm quite happy to be able to come and tell you about coins today.
is anybody thinking of going to Warwick next year to study maybe ancient history or something like that? Who's studying ancient history or looking at that maybe next year? Warwick also.
I have some brochures if anyone needs. I'll leave them behind at the end.
And it's worth saying, this book by Clare is actually in the study centre, so you know that you have to do classicist views. Here is the classicist.
We're going to do a little bit of classicist views today also.
Yeah. So can I suggest you get some paper out and make some notes, people. And then we'll go through the PowerPoint. And then hopefully you can have a look at some of these coins.
Yeah, so the aim is I'm going to start passing coins around during the talk. And so you are allowed to touch them, that's fine. They'll be either in this very handy small Tupperware as I brought with me, or a tray. So do feel free to pick them up and really look at them. I would just ask that when you're holding them, if you can hold them over the table. So if you drop the coin, it lands on the table. Because it'll never happen to any of you, but if you drop the coin and it rolls on the floor, we're going to spend the next 20 minutes all being like, where did it go? I've been in that position just myself. I want to avoid the pain. Yeah. And so yeah, if you want to take photographs of them or whatever, that's also fine. I don't know if phones are allowed in school.
Absolutely, yeah.
Good. So the other option is they might be.
But not when you're making notes in the middle of a lesson. I mean, obviously that gets done by pen and paper.
I'm just saying if you have a torch option on your phone, it actually really helps to bring out the detail, because sometimes the lighting can be a little bit. Yeah, I don't know if we should turn the lights on. It would be better or worse to be able to see the coins. Yeah. So I've got kind of a selection of coins of different denominations, just so you can sort of get a feel for what Roman coinage is like. Yeah, and so what I wanted to do today is kind of touch on some of the coins that you're looking at for the imperial image, but also then think about like, yeah, classicist views, and also like go a little bit beyond what they're getting you to look at to think about, yeah, other perspectives or other images of Augustus. So I thought I'd start with numismatics. What a word. Has anyone heard of the word before? Yeah, no. It's often, it has been, I think, a question on who wants to be a millionaire. So you're all going to be fully prepped. So numismatics is essentially the study or collection of currency. It's like the study of money. So this is coins, this is tokens, this is paper money, things like credit cards or debit cards, everything to do with money, because sometimes money is in a coin. That's what numismatics is as a discipline. And that's kind of my speciality at Warwick. And so I look at coins, but I also look at tokens. We're going to look at some tokens today as well from the Roman world. Metals are also important for the Roman world. But just so you know, when I say the word numismatics, we all know what that is. And before I start handing out the coins, I thought it'd be really interesting just to think a little bit like, why does the imperial image syllabus make you look at coins? Why is looking at coins important in the Roman world? Like, none of us are really looking at our 50-pence pieces. I mean, money doesn't even really, like, coins don't even really exist in society anymore, I think. Maybe almost post-money. But what is quite interesting is that the Romans, and I've got the reference here, and I can give you these slides so you can cite the classicist views. The Romans have a very kind of interesting approach to money. So the Greeks, in the classical Greek world, they made money much like today, right? They chose a design, and they just made coins of that design, and year in, year out, voila. The Romans had a very different attitude to money, and it comes from where we actually get our word money. The Latin word moneo, where we get our word money, means to remember or recall, or to warn. So it's quite a strange word to choose for money. But it indicates the fact that the Romans saw coinage as a currency to be exchanged, but also it was a medium of memory. It was to remember, to recall, to warn. And so in the Republican period, the mint was near the temple of Juno Moneta. So again, our obvious reference to money. But in that temple, they also kept things like archives, official records. It really was also a record of Roman history. And so what happened on Roman coinage from the Republican period onwards is they would change the design of the coins every few months to reflect what the moneyers wanted, to reflect, for instance, what Augustus wanted to communicate. Can you imagine if every few months we changed the design of British currency? Like to just be like, one month we might have, Commonwealth Games, one month we might have, I don't know, an honorary issue for Birmingham or Shrewsbury, that would change it every few months. So that's why it's kind of a really interesting thing to look at, because then you can kind of think about, well, actually this is what the Roman government wanted to communicate at this particular moment in time. And so yeah, this article by Meadows and Williams, they're the ones who talk about the role of coinage as a medium of memory, as well as kind of just a currency. So when we think about then money and who chose the designs for money, it's obvious that like Augustus is not sitting down and designing every coin himself, because how much time would that take? And he can't also be designing every relief, every statue. I mean, this is obviously done on his behalf by his kind of employees, by those who worked for the government, those who knew the types of ideologies that Augustus wanted to communicate. But when we look at ancient texts, for instance, this is Suetonius, it's clear that the citizens of the Roman Empire held Augustus responsible for the image, regardless of who chose it or who designed it. In their minds, it was Augustus's decision and it's his kind of monument. So Suetonius, and interestingly enough, ancient authors take pains to talk about coinage, right? Like, if it was something unimportant, authors wouldn't mention it, but they pause and talk about particular coins that were designed. So in this example from Suetonius, we've got this idea that, Suetonius tells us that Augustus and Agrippa go and see this astrologer. And then Augustus became quite paranoid, actually, really. He was like, I can't say when I was born, because then they predict my death. And like, no, but then, he decides then that the astronomer, the astrologer has predicted such a great future for him, that then he made his horoscope public and issued a silver coin stamped with the sign of the constellation Capricorn. And so this is the actual coin type, and this is Capricorn here, under which he was born. And I'll just say, and again, so all the coins of Augustus are actually online, on an online database, where you can log on. And so this is it's blurry from my angle, but, and you can see kind of the examples of the coins there. So for all the coins that I'm talking about, you'll be able to find them online using these links, so it's quite useful actually. So when we talk about coins, there's kind of particular specific terminology, which we'll just go over quickly. It's not particularly important, but just so you're aware. So the obverse is basically the head side, but this refers to the fact that coins are struck by almost like stamps, dies. So the obverse is basically the die that's in an anvil, and the reverse is the die that's held above. The legend is the writing on a coin. The field is any empty space. The picture is the type. And sometimes in Roman coins you get kind of this kind of line here and some writing beneath, and that's called the exurb. Just so you kind of have seen the terminology. It's not particularly vital to remember it all. So under Augustus, what sort of money existed? So we have the gold aureus, which is worth 400 asses. And then, so you can see the denominations as they're broken down here. So just to give you an idea of how much this is kind of worth, so the quadrans is the smallest, equivalent of like a 1 pence piece really. And then the aureus is like, let's call it the £50 note, you know, rarely seen. And so the annual pay of a legionary soldier was 300 denarii, so the silver coin. And to buy a loaf of bread, say, was like a semis. So really the quadrans is so low, it's kind of like, what were they using it for? To enter the bathhouse, maybe. So what I'm going to do then is pass around an aureus. I'll put it on this tray. So I don't have a coin of Augustus. Have you guys looked at this coin yet?
Yes.
Yes. So I'll talk about why I don't have an example of this coin in a minute. But I brought an aureus with you just so you can see like what an aureus is. This is pure gold. It's worth a lot of money in the Roman period, also in the modern day. I think we had to insure it for about £1,000. And there I was in the Gloucester Shrewsbury being like, nothing to see here, nothing to see here. And yeah, so it's pure gold. So the aureus I'm going to pass around is of Nero. You can see a really fat Nero on one side. And the other side you can see this, the god Salus. Does anyone know what Salus refers to? So it's the health of the emperor. You'll see it's quite worn. It's because gold is a very soft metal and it wears quite quickly. Actually, if you're passing it around from person to person, it's going to wear quite quickly. So feel free to touch it and look at it, put it back in the tray and then just pass them around. So this particular coin that is on the silver, can anyone tell me what it's communicating?
He's politician.
What's that?
He's politician.
Yeah, he's a politician image. So he's seated there on like the curule chair. He's holding the scroll. He's really like a leader. He's not a military leader. He's in the sphere of politics. Yeah. Anyone else have anything to add to that?
Come on, you can.
Ah, the memory. That don't ask me to recall what we've been taught. So the writing, the legend on the coin, the leges et jura, basically translates to he restored to the people of Rome their laws and rights. So this aureus, and we have to think about the denomination of the coin, is communicating really kind of what happens when Augustus becomes princeps, right? The settlement of 28 BC. So this example is in the British Museum. But interestingly, it's not struck at Rome. We think it was struck in Ephesus. So this is a city in modern-day Turkey. What kind of audience do you think, thinking about the gold coin, what kind of denominations existed in the Roman world? I mean, who would this coin have been aimed at? Yeah.
I guess upper class people and senators, people who could have the wages contained in gold.
Yeah, exactly. So who is going to use this like 50 quid equivalent coin? Like, you know, it's so aimed at the centers, aimed at the elites. That's ultimately who's going to use this coin. And so interestingly, we think the legend that this is a coin referring to the actual official settlement of Augustus, the senators would have recognized that, like the phrasing. It's very complex. But also it's struck in Ephesus. So this is a city outside of Rome deciding we're going to make this coin. And we only have 2 known examples of it in the whole world. Did you guys know this? It's so rare. So it's not like they're making an enormous quantity of coins to issue. We have this coin in the British Museum, and we have this rather beaten up version in the Blackburn Museum, and that's it. So So whoever decided to make this coin made it in very, very, very small quantities for a very small select audience. And that's what we need to understand when we look at this coin. It's not kind of being issued for everyone. It's something very small and discreet for an audience who would appreciate it, would understand the reference. And it's ultra, ultra rare today. So when you talk about this coin, I think that's something really to keep in mind. And again, so if you're looking for sort of publication society, this is the publication that talks about the rare second example that they found in the Blackburn Museum of all places. So the reason we think this gold coin was struck in Ephesus is there's another coin of silver that we think is connected to it. And so this has two references. So when I say RIC, this is the Roman imperial coinage. And so in Rome, or in the Roman Empire, there's the coinage of the official government issued at the mint in Rome. But then there's also the coins of the cities in the provinces that is issued by the cities. They're the ones who have control of it, who decide what to put on it. And that's called Roman provincial coinage. And so this is kind of the silver matching specimen, also from the mint of Ephesus in the same year. And again, we kind of get this kind of reference to the settlement of 28 BC. So here Octavian is described as kind of the champion of the liberty of the Roman people. So Libertatis Populi Romani Vindex, with Pax, named as Pax, standing on the other side. So the coins are issued at Ephesus, not in Rome, so it's coming out of the provinces, and for a very, very, very small audience. So what we find in the Roman world is that we get coins issued in large volume, which clearly then the message is to really communicate, and we'll look at an example of that in a minute. And then we get coins that are issued really in small numbers with a specific purpose in mind. Interestingly enough, this silver coin from Ephesus is a Christophorus. That's the denomination. So in Ephesus they didn't even have kind of denarii. That wasn't their local system of currency. And that they would often have this snake on a sacred basket, which is called a kista. That just is referring to the fact that it's the denomination is the Christophorus, not a denarius. So I wanted to talk then a little bit more about provincial coinage and how that's different from Roman coinage issued by the government. So it would be as if, for example, we get our currency from the British government, the pounds, notes, but say Shrewsbury decided it was going to issue its own small change. What are we going to put in the coinage of Shrewsbury? Obviously the Abbey, maybe Shrewsbury College. If you can lobby the people hard enough. And so what happens in the Roman world is we have this kind of overarching government currency, but cities in the empire can strike their own coins as well. These were normally small denominations, so bronze coins for small change. And so then, from that, we actually get this interesting insight into how the cities, how civic populations, how they imagined Augustus. It's not how Augustus wanted to present himself, but actually how the provinces, how the civic elite, how they, in different cities, imagined Augustus. So the next coin I'm going to pass around, it's a bit more beaten up than the one on the screen, is a provincial coin. We don't know from where, because there's no name on the coin. So we know it's not like a Roman government coin issued in Rome. So it's struck in a colony. And the reason we know it's struck in a colony is that it has Latin. So normally, most provincial coins would be in Greek, because that's the language spoken, not Latin. But this one's Latin, with a portrait of Augustus. And on the other side, we've got two priests. You can see them with their veiled heads. With two oxen kind of ploughing the land. Has anyone encountered this image before in the Roman world? So this is a sign of the foundation of a colony. So you may or may not know that Julius Caesar really had a huge sort of initiative to put colonies overseas, and Augustus continues that. So a colony is founded, and so there's a very particular imagery associated with the founding of a colony. That's why they're using Latin. Oh, we're very Roman here in this colony. We have Latin. We have the imagery of kind of, the ploughing of the land. And we have Augustus, the image of Augustus. So whoever this colony is, at their foundation, they've decided they're going to strike a coin commemorating Augustus and the very, very beginnings of the city. Unfortunately, as I say, it doesn't have a name, so we don't know which colony. And you can look it up online. So there's another database online called Roman Provincial Coinage, and if you type Augustus into this database, you will see just how many combinations and iterations and designs that happened, and how Augustus was imagined and reimagined again and again and again throughout the empire. So our version is a little bit more beaten up, but never mind. This is a nice version, so you can see what it should look like. But you should be able to make out the priests ploughing and Augustus. And so that's why I wanted to connect a little bit to kind of what classical scholars have said, where classics as a discipline has kind of moved. So essentially, probably the most seminal work ever in the study of Augustus is by someone called Paul Zanker, who wrote in 1987, The Power of Images in the Age of Augustus. And so before this period, really truly, like the study of Augustus is like Suetonius, like all the texts, the Res Gestae. And he was really one of the first to really think like, why don't we actually look at objects also? And he was kind of spurred on by the fact that they were excavating a lot in Rome, and they were finding all these sorts of things in Rome. He's like, oh, this is all relevant to understanding Augustus. So he wrote this book which talks about what kind of images or visual language were popular under Augustus, and how was imagery being used to shape the values of society. The Augustan image, the idea of Augustus as a princeps. And so what he kind of proposed in this book is that imagery gets issued by Augustus or Augustus's government, coins, architecture, so that gets issued out, and people look at that imagery and be like, ah, and then they adopt it themselves, like a one-way communication, so to speak. So people might decide to adopt this imagery as a symbol of loyalty, because it became quite fashionable, perhaps, to convey kind of the idea that you're connected to the emperor and the elite. So that's kind of what came out. But since then, okay, this is 1987, 88, it was originally in German, then a translation. But more recently, what scholars have said is that actually this idea of a one-way communication, issuing something out and then being adopted by others, is not really probably what went on. And so I've just got two examples of books that kind of push back against this idea that are both published quite recently. One is by Olivier Hexter, who wrote a book called Emperors and Ancestors. And he's like, look, the whole idea of the imperial image is that it's a feedback loop. Yeah, Augustus or the government might put out images, but so might other people, like the provincial cities we were just talking about. And they both feed on each other in kind of a big circle. So it's not a one-way process. It's kind of much more complicated than that. So Zanker has this Augustus who's actively fashioning his own image and has a purpose in doing things. And he's like, well, actually no, because when Augustus wants to represent his power, he has to represent it to all these people in all these different areas. So he has to kind of be different, have a different image in different places. And so the example he talks about is this. So this is Augustus. But in Egypt, Augustus has to be a pharaoh, right? And so this is Augustus in Egypt. So this idea that you have to be kind of what your subjects expect of you is embodied in that point. And so more recently, there's a book called The Social Dynamics of Roman Imperial Imagery. And from that, there's again this idea that it's not just like one sort of one sort of image being issued out of the centre. We've got all these different people creating images of Augustus. And so there's no kind of one-way model in a sense. Like everyone's using Augustus for their own purposes, how they like to express their own messages. So that's kind of where the idea of imagery has shifted. And so the reason I mention this change in discourse is because when Zankel was writing, provincial coinage, we kind of knew of it, but no one had really gathered it together before. And now we're beginning to gather it all together. We can begin to see actually, like just the different images of Augustus that we find. All right, so this particular coin, you guys discuss this one as well? Yeah? Can anyone tell me what it's about? Yes?
Augustus's sunset, so that being together with shoes and spears is the first thing you
Perfect. Yeah, so this is a coin commemorating Gaius and Lucius Caesar becoming the young princeps, the young rulers, being named as Augustus's heirs. So the issue under Augustus was that he was kind of in a very unique position. And how do you pass that on? Should you even pass that on? It was kind of quite, well, a little bit awkward, let's say. So unlike the other coin we're looking at, which only exists in 2 specimens, this coin, emphasizing the sons as the heirs, is really common, super common. Like this was clearly the message that the government wanted to communicate to everyone, and that makes sense, right? You need to know who the heirs are going to be. There can be no ambiguity, there can be no confusion. And so the shields and spears, I'm sure you've done this, is also mentioned in the res gestae of Augustus. That's the equestrians who give these kind of gifts to Gaius and Lucius. So for the syllabus, they again give you an aureus to look at. Fine, but again, like, this is for the elite. The same type also exists in silver. And basically from 8 BC to AD 13, the only imagery coming out of their own mint is this. Every single year, Gaius and Lucius, Gaius and Lucius, Gaius and Lucius, Gaius and Lucius. These coins are everywhere. So as a communicative tool, they really are emphasizing the way we don't find in the texts, that this is, in fact, these are the heirs and everyone should know that. And then we get things like this. Can anyone guess what on earth is going on here? Pretty crappy, isn't it? As if I was trying to make a coin. I still don't think I could do it that well. So what happened was, these coins were so common and circulated so widely that they also entered into Barbaricum, the barbarian tribes, and into India, and people just start imitating them, because this is what a Roman coin looks like now. That was so common. So it goes to show you, this coin type communicates in a way that the other kind of the laws type just does not. So yeah, this is just one of the many imitations of that design. And that design is also picked up on Roman tokens. So I don't have a token of this type to show you, but I do have a token. So essentially, in addition to coins issued by the Roman government, coins issued by individual cities, there's also tokens, which are made out of lead. And so that's why this is staying in the plastic, because I don't, well, you don't want to get lead poisoning for one piece, but better for all, we don't handle lead. And they were made actually just by random individuals. So if you wanted to make a token, you could. You got some marble, you you carved it, maybe you paid someone to carve it, make it a bit nicer. And then you would just cast your own tokens. So this one, for example, oops, is this work? Yes, is made by an individual, it's a bit broken, Marcus Valerius, son of Marcus Augustus. Here he is in his toga, looking rather magnificent. And here's the mold that made that token. But then what's interesting is, so this is then what individuals are deciding to make and put on their tokens. And they put on imagery that references that Gaius and Lucius coin, because here they are, the two sons sitting, Gaius and Lucius, and here are the shields and the spears, but it's a little bit different. You don't want to be accused of like forging coins, so it can't be the same. But this is someone who clearly knew that coin and has made an adoption of it. And again, like everything else I'm talking about today, it's all available online, and that's the link to the tokens. So it's like taking the imagery and making it your own, like remixing it a little bit, so to speak. So what I've got to show you is a token that has, it's going to be very hard to work out, because lead does not survive as well as other materials. On one side you have a woman, there's a Flavian style headdress, like very goofy. And so women made tokens as well, it wasn't just men. And on the other side you have the number 2. And we'll talk a little bit about these numbered tokens in a second. And then we also have provincial coins that reference Gaius and Lucius as the heirs of Augustus, but they don't imitate the coin imagery at all. Even though it was widely circulating, this is just one example, which just has Gaius on one side as a bust, Lucius on the other. So they clearly, the city, this is Aelius in Aigai, decided, what should we put on our coins? Let's put Gaius and Lucius in our coins, honour them as the heirs to Augustus, but they decided to do it in their own way. But in, for instance, Aeolus in Aigai, that would have been the image that was circulating and being used by people in the town. So the interesting thing about tokens is that we find on tokens and on provincial coins actually imagery that we don't find on official coinage. So this idea that it's not just about the government issuing money out, it's about this feedback loop, it's about people creating imagery for themselves. So on some coin tokens, the image is quite bad here, I apologise. We have Augustus and Livia. So Livia doesn't appear on Roman governmental currency. Only under Tiberius, when Augustus is dead, does Livia appear. But on tokens, yeah, and on provincial coins, why not Livia? They have her there, so there's a very different imagery going on. So we also have some bronze tokens made in Rome, which are quite famous, which have the images of Augustus or Tiberius or Augustus and Livia on one side, numbers on the other. We don't know what they're used for. Maybe a lottery, maybe a game. But these are again issued by individuals, not the government, for their own use. And we know that because we've got this fel beneath Augustus, which means feliciter, best wishes. So perhaps on Augustus' birthday, perhaps on the day of his anniversary of succession, best wishes to Augustus. And so Augustus isn't making things to wish himself best wishes, not in this occasion at least. And so there's a workshop in Rome making these items for a game, for a lottery, we don't know for what. And they make these images with Augustus, or people who go to the same workshop and say, I would like some sexual scenes, please, instead. So the same workshop is like, oh, you want Augustus? Oh, you want sex scenes? Fine. So I've got some replicas here. They're called spintriae, and I'll pass these around as well. There's about, I think in total, 13 different sexual scenes on these tokens. I don't have an image because I wasn't quite sure if I'm allowed to show you these or not, but I do have permission now. Google spintriae, you'll find out. So I included this because I think it's worth thinking about what does it mean that a workshop is making tokens with the image of Augustus, the image of Livia, or sex scenes. I mean, Sexual imagery in the Roman world was not so kind of shocking as it is today. It was part of everyday life. But yeah, I mean, this one workshop is like, and Ted Buttrey, who was the first scholar to do a study of these, was suggesting that maybe these pieces were used in a game where like one person was like heads of the emperor, including Augustus, and the other side was sex scenes, and they would like maybe play a board game or something. It's very like sort of basically sexual salacious gossip as it comes out. So we've also got tokens that show Augustus as divine. So we know he's divine because he's got this radiant spiky crown. That means he's deified. Also tokens showing people playing a board game. So it's kind of really interesting that the image of Augustus could be used in this way. It's kind of like people walking in and be like, need me some tokens? Oh, what would you like on these tokens, sir? Oh, I'll have a divine Augustus, thank you very much. Or the next person comes in and says, oh, I really want 2 people playing a game because I want to create a feeling of leisure. Or someone might come in and say, I want Livia, I want Drusilla, all these members of the imperial family. And it really goes to show that really it's the image of Augustus is being made by all sectors of society. And interestingly enough, on Roman coins, where's my next container? If I run out of containers. Is there 2 containers circulating at the moment? If I just oh no, here's my container, don't worry. So on the smallest coins, you know, these 1 pence pieces, the quadrands, there is no image of the emperor. So this is official coinage. I'll pass the quadrands around. Official coinage, no portrait. Why? We don't know, in all honesty. So on this particular coin, the quadrands, and this is the exact same type that's being circulated, we have an altar, and on the other side we have SC. So for whatever reason, all bronze coinage in Rome had SC on it, so Senatus Consultum. And so, why? There's a lot of debate about this. Everyone's like, Monson, who's like the oldest kind of, scholar, was like, well, maybe Augustus took control of the gold and silver, and he allowed the Senate to have the bronze, this wonderful kind of sharing of power. It's nonsense. We don't know, but there's clearly SC on the bronze coins for whatever reason, and that SC continues on well into like for hundreds of years. So maybe after a certain point, it's just what Roman bronze coins had, Senatus Consultum. And what we can see is there's names on the coins, on these very early quadrantes, and these are the names of the moneyers. So in Rome there were 3 officials, often very early in their careers, young men starting out on the Cursus Honorum. And one of the early positions you could hold is money, so to be in charge of the mint and the coins for that year. In the Roman Republic, you could sort of put a design on the coins that reflected your family or your interests, but as we go into the late Republic and the Augustan period, you no longer have control really of what to put on the coins. It's kind of, it has to sort of reflect Augustus. And what we have here is this kind of interesting midway point. So at a certain point, the names of the moneyers disappear. We don't know in the end who's behind the scenes, but on this quadrands, they're still named. And so the triumvir refers to the position of moneyar, as does the AAFF. So it's for Augustus, it's under Augustus, but the moneyers are still there. They do disappear eventually. And again, just to show that even these coins, we've got to pay attention to them. So on this lead token, we again have an altar. You can kind of see the reference. And on the other side, Elitus, actually, kind of this side of the orbit. So yeah, people really did kind of also play with the image of Augustus. And it kind of seems odd, actually, to think, why would Augustus be a play piece? But when you think about chess, actually, you are playing with the king and the queen as well. So I think it's a nice parallel. So we have a lot of these bone pieces that are gaming pieces that are for a game. And we know it's for a game because there was a set found in a child's tomb, like of 12 pieces, all in one nice box. So it's clearly a playing set. I mean, you can have gods on them, or you can have characters from the theatre, as you like. But this set from the child's tomb had Augustus as one of the characters. So, you know, clearly an image with the gods, interestingly enough, to be played with. And we know it's Augustus. Okay, it looks nothing like Augustus, does it? I mean, I know this projection is bad, but the image is also doesn't look anything like Augustus. But on the other side, we have Sebastos, which is the Greek word for Augustus. So we know it is definitely Augustus. And so, yeah, these playing pieces were found in modern-day Ukraine. And you can see kind of the array of designs that the playing pieces had, and each had different numbers on them. Again, numbers. What is this game? So the numbers are in Greek and Latin. So in Greek, the numbers are just the letters of the alphabet. So number 4, for example, is the delta, the triangle. Scenes of Egyptian buildings, suburbs from Alexandria, a bit Monopoly-esque, perhaps. But amongst all this is just like Augustus, again. You know, and the portrait looks nothing like Augustus. But we know from texts who talk about this, like quite often portraits of the emperor look nothing like the emperor. And people write about this, like, oh, Hadrian, I visited a statue of you the other day, looked nothing like you. Perhaps you could send a better statue to replace this really crappy one. So when we think about the image of the emperor, if we accept that different people are constructing images of Augustus, sometimes Augustus may not look like the Augustus we know. The other powerful thing about coins, I've all gathered here, is that it gives us an insight into sort of the characters who don't sort of, you know, whose story may not have survived as well as, say, Augustus, because the winner writes history. And so I thought I would bring also this bronze coin of Cleopatra along. And I've got a better image down below, so our coin's a little bit beaten up from having circulated, or perhaps spent some time in a river by the looks of it. And yeah, I just wanted to, has anyone seen like a portrait of Cleopatra before? Or have you only just read about her in texts? Yeah?
We looked at this coin very briefly.
Ah, the one with the top right.
We've got a sort of, yeah, pretend, basically.
Yeah, so this one was issued with, with Mark Antony. And what's interesting is they're kind of shown as equal rulers, right? Like one on each side of the coin. The obverse, which is the one who's really the one in charge, is Cleopatra. So she's clearly the one who fronted the cash. I mean, we can probably, it doesn't surprise any of us. But she's the one who's kind of the obverse, and Mark Antony is the reverse. But that is a coin kind of issued for use by Roman soldiers, but in the Roman world, because we've got the Latin, you know, and it looks like a Roman denarius. Whereas this bronze coin I'm circulating is from Egypt. So Egypt was quite strange in kind of the Mediterranean, in that there was no, they didn't use any silver at all. They only had different sized bronze coins. And the reason they decided to do that was because they had all the grain, right? And so all the merchants had to come. And so if you're a merchant and you've come to buy grain and you turn up in Egypt for the grain, they're like, yeah, we don't use silver anymore. You have to exchange all your silver for our local coinage of bronze. You have no choice but to accept that. And so the Ptolemies were able to make a small fortune of this by saying, we're only going to use bronze coinage in our kingdom, and anyone who comes to our kingdom has to exchange all their silver for bronze if you're going to buy our grain. So they only use bronze. And all their coinage has the eagle on it. So this really becomes a symbol of the Ptolemies. And they have just different sized bronzes. That's how it works in Egypt. It's quite interesting actually, people always look at the portrait of Cleopatra and think, oh, was she as beautiful as everyone said? But when you read the text, it wasn't really like her beauty per se, it was more like her her skills at conversation, etc., etc. And so when Augustus takes over Egypt, the Romans come, they think this is actually a fine system, in fact, because why would you have a money-making enterprise like that? So they keep Egypt this kind of, it's called a closed currency system, where you only can use the coinage of Egypt in Egypt, and it's bronze coins. Whereas in other cities, they were kind of a bit more open, like silver is silver is silver, gold is gold is gold. But in Egypt, it was bronze only. I also have a coin of Mark Antony that I will pass around. Here we go. So has anyone come across this coin before? Yeah, so this is one. It's a coin of Mark Antony. What seems very strange about this coin, actually, when you look at it, compared to the coins we've looked at already? What strikes you? Like what's going on here? Is there a portrait? No portrait, which is very strange. When we look at the other things we've been looking at, there's always a portrait. So what we've got is basically on one side a ship with a scepter, and the other side an aquila. So this is, the legionary standards that sort of resemble a legion. And so basically right before Actium, right before he loses to Octavian at that point, Mark Antony releases an enormous issue of coinage called the legionary denarii, which has on one side a ship like this, on the other side the eagle standard, the aquila of the legions, and with each different coin, a different legion is named. So this one names Legion 7, but Legion 1 is named, Legion 2 is named, Legion 3 is named, each legion is named specifically. What might be the purpose of such a coinage issued just before Actium? Yes? Yeah, like to have to sort of, if you're going to pay the legions, pay them in a currency that's like, it's all about you, legions. Interestingly, he's named here as a triumvirate. This is like, the triumvirate, although the triumvirate no longer existed at this point. But nonetheless, Antony's like, oh yes, I am a triumvirate for restoring the Republic. Yeah, why doesn't he show himself? Why doesn't he show Cleopatra? It's a really interesting series. And it's issued in huge coins.
Ship, is that not used by Augustus as well in one of his earlier coins around Actium? So who probably clue?
I mean, probably like the ship becomes quite a common image on coins, actually. Yeah, and in the end, Augustus ends up using these coins. We'll look at that in a minute. Yeah, so I mean, they knew each other's coins, and they were constantly responding to them all the time. Yeah. So it's enormous. It's a really interesting design decision. Is it because everyone was speculating that Antony was under the spell of Cleopatra, he decided not to put himself on the coins? We don't know. So he strikes these coins, as I say, in huge quantities. This is clearly to pay like the entire army. And then Actium occurs. And so the idea that scholars had was that, so say this Legion 7 coins, Legion 7, was to pay the 7th Legion, like you got your pay with your name on it, so to speak, as an honor. But actually, when we look at hoards, so you guys know what a hoard is? So they didn't have, well, they had some banks in antiquity, but generally, if you got like your pay, you'd put it together, and if you're going off to battle, you would bury that. I'll be back for you later, honey. And of course, many people did not manage to return to dig up their money. Maybe they also forgot where they buried it, which can happen. So when we look at hoards, and this is the hoard right at Actium, right at 31 BC. So someone has buried a whole bunch of coins right at the point of Actium. you can begin to actually think about like what coins were in circulation and who had access to coins. So the earliest coin in this hoard is from 119 BC. So that coin is still circulating around, you know. We change our currency so often, it's kind of hard to visualize that, but like, before Queen Elizabeth, like you would have different, you know, old kings' coins floating about. And so in the Roman world, because the denarius stayed the same, like coins would be circulating for hundreds of years. And you're like, what is this coin? So the earliest coin is from 119 BC. But then the rest are all these Mark Antony denarii. And you can see here Legion 2, Legion 3, Legion 6, Legion 7, Legion 8. So in the end he issues these coins that name the different legions, but they all get paid with a mix, so to speak. They're not trying to keep it all separate. And what's even more kind of bizarre is that then these coins begin to appear after Actium in Italy. So Octavian wins, he becomes Augustus. Why are Mark Antony's coins still circulating? And we think that what happened was that Octavian wins, he seizes Mark Antony's treasury, and he's like, you know what, I'm just going to pay them with the coins of Mark Antony. Why make my own coins? So when we think about coinages and meeting, you think it would be so important, right? To have like the proper imagery to pay the soldiers of Octavian after Actium. But we know he was paying them with this. Okay, and so maybe, because it's like a legionary image and not a portrait of Mark Antony, he could get away with it. But we don't think that's what was happening. He was just using, it was an enormous quantity of money to pay his soldiers. And we know because we find these coins in hoards as the soldiers go back to get their land in Italy. In the colonies that are being set up, we find these coins immediately afterwards. So here in Este in Italy, and again this is another online database that you can have a look at. It shows all the coin hoards of the Roman Republic. Yes, you can see denarius 286, but a lot of them are of the Mark Antony coin type. And so this is a colony that was founded by Octavian. There are 307 coins found in a pot, and 50 of them are the legionary denarii. And only 2 coins naming Octavian. So there's actually more coins of Antony than Octavian. And we know that. We know from the textual sources that Antony was the wealthier person at that point before the defeat. He was the one issuing the money, he had Cleopatra. Octavian didn't have the cash. The other thing that probably influenced Octavian's decision is that Mark Antony's coins were debased. I don't know if anyone, you can't pick it up by looking at it, but there's not the same amount of silver in this as in another denarius. Less silver. So Mark Antony only had 92% silver in his coins. Octavian had 96% silver. Now you might think like, who the hell cares? Who would notice? But people did. People realized, they knew. And so what we think happened is the silver, so this is how much silver is in the coin. There might be a bit of lead, a bit of bronze, a bit of other things in there to make up the mix. So in the local Christophoric currency, so this is the coin used that Ephesus is issuing and that other cities in that region are issuing, it was only ever 92% fine. So he's probably just using local silver sources that weren't refined to a very high standard of silver. Octavians are 96. For whatever reason, or however, people find out people knew this, that these were not good coins. So say I give, let's say I give you a coin of 92% silver and a coin of 100% silver. And I say, okay, you'll save one and spend the other. What is your choice?
I'll spend the less silver.
Yeah, exactly. You want to like save the good silver, put it away, and then the one that's only like 92%, so you're like, oh, I'm going to pass this on. Don't want it to, you know, so if you get like a fake coin or a note that's a little bit torn or has some writing on it, you're always a little bit like, We try and get rid of it. And it's just an economic law that says bad money drives good money out. That means if money is not very good, you want to just quite quickly pass it on, and you're going to save the good stuff. And this is what happens with Mark Antony's denarii. So probably the problem that Octavian faced was that if he melted down Antony's coins, yes.
Sorry, were they still worth the same thing? Right?
Yes, but less silver.
Yeah, so you could pay with a loaf of bread for both.
Yeah, but like, you know, but don't you want the one with silver? Like, yeah, theoretically they can accept, they have to accept it. But it just means that you're going to be wanting to buy your bread with the Antony coin and save the Octavian coin. Because, you know, one never knows in society. Especially if you've just lived through a whole bunch of civil wars, you want the pure silver. So, yeah, it's quite interesting. And so what would have happened if Octavian, when he gets Antony's huge treasury, and he melts down all of Antony's coins and makes new coins, what would have happened? Yeah, you end up with less money. Because if you're melting down 92% silver to make 96% silver, and you would actually end up with less cash. And so Octavian just went for the practical solution here, and decided to just use Mark Antony's coins. And so the effect of this is that Mark Antony's legionary denarii circulate until the 3rd century AD. In Britain, everywhere. Like, these coins just continue to circulate for hundreds of years. Octavian's coins, Augustus's coins get removed under Nero. That's probably the last time we see them circulating. Antony's coins live on, and on, and on, and on. And this very interesting moment occurs under the Emperor Marcus Aurelius. So this is the 2nd century AD. So Mark Antony's coins have been in circulation for a long time. Marcus Aurelius decides to strike a coin, a denarius, that restores Mark Antony's coin. So an emperor could restore a building, you know, or he could restore a temple, or he could restore a coin. And this is this idea that the Romans had, that coins were in fact like little monuments, little moments of memory. And so Marcus Aurelius, bizarrely, we have no idea why, decides to restore the denarius of Mark Antony that was still circulating. So we've got the ship still, and we've got the eagle still the legions there, Legion 6, this one. But around the outside we have Antoninus Augur. So Antoninus, that's a reference to Mark Antony, who was an augur. On the original coin, he just had Aug for augur. But by this stage, of course, Aug means Augustus, which he wasn't, so they've had to add augur. And then triumvir for restoring the Republic. And on the other side, the legend says Antoninus and Verus, so this is Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus, the Augusti, rest, restored it. I mean, does anyone have, any thoughts as to why? I mean, of all the coins they would restore a Mark Antony legionary denarius, but the coinage is still circulating at this time, it's well known, and a later emperor decides to restore it. So I always think, when you think about kind of the longevity of kind of messages, so like Octavian wins and all the texts have the Augustan side of things, but on coinage, Mark Antony kind of wins actually, because his coins are the ones that are used the longest and are eventually restored under Marcus Aurelius, a very bizarre moment in history. So I'm going to kind of leave it there. As I say, I'll send you this PowerPoint, and these are just kind of other resources if you're more interested. So if you look at Roman Republican coins, they're all online. The Roman Imperial coins, so these are when Augustus becomes Augustus, are online. The tokens are online. If you ever want to tweet me anything, you can. And we also have a blog where a lot of these points are sort of discussed in more detail. But I'll also say that if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them as well.
Anybody got any questions? about anything basically. I mean, it could be studying at a higher level as well. Have to be about Augustus. Study on the letters. What are they used for and how? I mean,
Oh yeah, sure. I'll bring up the particular coin. Yeah, so, oh yeah, that's fine. So they're just they're symbols of different kinds of positions. So the symbolum, I'll show you that. It's this kind of like, it's like a giant ladle, really. And the letus is this curved staff, and the letus is a symbol of being an augur. So the priesthood of the augur, it was like you would take the omens, the birds, whatever. And the symbolum is the symbol of a priest, a pontifex. And so Gaius was pontifex and Lucius was augur. And so that's why it's kind of shown here. They each held a different position. So pontifex, augur. And there was this real big problem with like, how do you, it's not meant to be a monarchy, right? Like that's the whole point of Augustus. It's first man among equals. But the moment you, like, if it's not a monarchy, how can you designate an heir? And it's a really complex, mind-bending situation for the Romans. And so the way that Augustus tries to do it is to slowly give positions. You know, to be like, well, eventually, if you continue to accrue these positions, you will naturally succeed me. And so that's why I think that's being referenced there. They're just indicating that these are not just kind of the leaders of the youth, but they're also kind of priests in their own rights, yeah. And so I'd say there's more than one pontifex and there's more than one augur, so there's other kind of elite Romans held this position as well. But yeah, that's why it's appearing here on this particular coin.
Was one of these found in Britain fairly recently? Last couple of years?
Yeah, they're, as I say, well, not the aurei, but the denarii are found everywhere. And I think there's quite a few have been found in Britain, actually. Do you guys know about the portable antiquities scheme?
They weren't done.
Yeah, so there's a database where if you find a coin or something that's considered treasure, under British law you have to register it. It goes onto a database, and so for these coins, I think quite a few have been found in Britain. If you just put in like Gaius Caesar or Lucius Caesar coin, it'll bring it up. But yeah, they circulated that, as I say, for this whole period of time, which is like what, 13 plus 8, 23 years? 22 years? Anyway, I was never good at maths. That many years. That's all they're striking. Is this type, because really it's how do you communicate an heir? Like, you really need to get the message out there, because if Augustus dies, it's going to be a very uncomfortable situation otherwise. And so interestingly, it's coinage that's then the medium that's emphasizing that. We don't really have that huge emphasis in the texts in the same way, where it's just like all about Gaius and Lucius. Pity that they died, but well, best laid plans and all that, yeah.
I was going to ask, why are Gaius and Lucius always shown together on the same coin instead of just a Gaius coin, just a Lucius coin? Or, well, I haven't seen very many of them that are just individual.
Yeah, so there are individual ones. So if you go Gaius, Lucius. Wait. No, hang on, that didn't work. I have to just put Lucius or Gaius Caesar. Hang on, that was a really poor search. Lucius Caesar. Actually, just put Lucius. There is one of them, I can't remember which one it is, where he is shown just alone on a horse. And we think for that one, it was like a particular display.
Could it have been one famous one where he's near the pride and he's doing a little horse competition?
Yeah, so it's this one.
I remember.
Yeah, so this one. So based on an Arrhenius, well remembered, better remembered than me. Where he's on this, yeah, he's shown basically by himself. On a horse. Yeah, but otherwise I think they're shown together because they're the leaders of these together. And yeah, it's kind of like an air of despair, isn't it? Which even then, that wasn't enough. So yeah, guys are shown individually like this, and quite often we find, well, we know that for like Roman use, these equestrian displays are very important to sort of show their skills and stuff like that. And so we think this is a particular moment where he impressed the troops. But otherwise, I think it is because it's a dynastic thing. They're both so young that they're just being shown together, and often interchangeably. And also on the provincial coins that I showed, they're often also just shown together. Even if they're on each side of the coin, they're still together. So this message of like Gaius Lucius, Gaius Lucius, it must have gone out to the provinces as well, because otherwise, yeah, like they don't show them kind of seated, but it's always like Gaius Lucius on the provincial coins. So I'll just show you that as well. Provincial coinage. Search. So for instance, Gaius. No, this one's got a replica too, but anyway. But yeah, so these heads of Gaius and Lucia back to back. Again, they're shown together. It's a different kind of image, but shown together, back to back. Oh, here you go, Gaius by himself. Da, da, da. From Spain. So yeah, these kind of individual suits might choose one then just to show, but generally, yeah, they're kind of, even in the res gesta, it's always Gaius and Lucius together, I think. It's like the message, which may or may not be picked up by the provinces. We're like, we take Gaius. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. They don't really strike for Lucius. That's it. Yeah. Other questions?
I think that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. If you can switch that off, but